What's up, Headliner Nation? Welcome back to the Fantasy Headliners. Kyle coming to you with Week 9 rankings for the quarterback position. We are going to flow through this video, get you a lot of information as quickly as possible, touch on my top 20 quarterbacks for Week 9. Before we do that, though, if you haven't seen yet, just an update on our accuracy rankings for Fantasy Pros out of 153 people. Right now, number 24 overall, 32 overall for quarterbacks. Looking to bump up a few spots here in Week 9. So let's jump into it. Let's talk about quarterbacks and where we have them ranked for this week. For the second straight week, we are going to go with Russell Wilson at number 1 overall for quarterbacks. Tampa Bay is giving up over 20 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks right now. Expect a huge week from Wilson. Number 2 going to be Matthew Stafford. A little bit higher on him than the expert consensus rankings right now, but Oakland's giving up the second most fantasy points per game. Stafford is also tied for second in touchdowns. I expect to see a lot of scoring in this game. Dak Prescott at number 3. The Giants are giving up the 9th most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks right now. And on a point per game basis, Prescott is still at QB4. Even though we've had some rough weeks over the last 4 weeks, he's still definitely up there and deserves a ranking like this. Aaron Rodgers at number 4. Over his last 2 games, 734 yards, 8 touchdowns, no interceptions. He's staying hot. As long as he's hot, he's in our lineup. I expect another decent week from him in Week 4. Deshaun Watson coming in at number 5. This game is going to be in England, and Jacksonville has caused 7 turnovers the last 2 games on defense. So I'm being cautious with his ranking this week. I think that we could see a little bit of a limited upside for him. We'll see what happens overall. I'm just not going to chance it and have him too high up there, but I could see him being anywhere from about 3 to 7 this week. Gardner Minshew at number 6. Houston's giving up the 6th most fantasy points per game right now to quarterbacks. He has more than 200 passing yards in all but 1 game this season. He's a really safe bet with a nice floor or a nice ceiling this week and a high upside game. Lamar Jackson coming in at number 7. I am worried about his upside a little bit, but let me be 100% clear with you. If you do not have one of these guys above Lamar Jackson in these rankings, you start Lamar Jackson. If you have one of these guys and you're still like, I need a lot of points this week, Lamar Jackson is your ceiling. There is nobody at the quarterback position that can score more points at will than Lamar Jackson because of his rushing upside. I am worried about the upside in general because of a tough matchup. However, over the last 3 games, 15 rushing attempts per game, and over the last 2 weeks, 8 yards per attempt. So again, that rushing upside helps keep his ceiling pretty high, even if we are a little bit worried about the floor this week. He has too much upside to sit unless, like a Gardner Minshew, if you've got him and you're like, I just need points, I have this matchup, I'm projected to win by a lot, I just want to make sure I get points, then you go with a guy like Gardner Minshew. If you're facing the top team in the league, you need to score points this week, you need a lot, you go with Lamar Jackson. Coming in at number 8, Derek Carr. Detroit's giving up the 7th most fantasy points per game. He is first in completion percentage with at least 90 attempts. I don't think he's getting enough notoriety for how well he is actually playing this year. Derek Carr, extremely under the radar. Yeah, he hasn't put up a ton of gaudy numbers, but he's still been pretty good. Again, this matchup, there's going to be a lot of scoring in. Kirk Cousins at number 9. Casey's giving up over 19 fantasy points per game right now. Since week 5, Cousins is the quarterback 4. Maybe a little bit of limited upside. I think we see a lot of Dalvin Cook this week and a lot of Alexander Mattison as well. So I think we see a little bit of limited upside with Kirk Cousins, but I definitely think we can dial him in for about 250 and 2 touchdowns. Coming in at number 10, Sam Darnold, bounce back week, baby. We're putting Sam Darnold in our lineups this week. Miami is giving up the 3rd most fantasy points per game. They also just placed Xavier Howard on the IR, so he is not going to be available for the Dolphins either. Fire Sam Darnold up, especially you DFS players. Fire Sam Darnold up if you're going to be playing some GPP contests this week. We talked about him and the Jets a lot. We like them down the stretch. Here's their first easy game of the stretch. This is where things turn around for them. Josh Allen, Washington is giving up the 6th most rushing yards to quarterbacks right now, but they have limited quarterbacks to only 16 fantasy points per game. So do we see a lot of Devin Singletary? Do we see a lot of Frank Gore? Do we see Allen run on the ground a little bit? I think the upside there is for Allen to run a little bit this week. If we can get about 50 yards or so, maybe a rushing touchdown out of him, absolutely perfect. Hopefully there's not a whole lot of inconsistencies in the passing game. That's the only reason I've got him just pulled down just a little bit, is because Washington's actually been pretty decent against the passing game this year. Jameis Winston at number 12. He has over 300 yards in 4 of his last 5 games, and Seattle's giving up over 18 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks this week. Yes, he's going to give you some heartburn. He's going to make your chest ache a little bit. He's going to make your blood pressure go up. He's going to do all those things to you. You're never going to feel good about putting Jameis Winston in your lineup, but the ceiling is way too high every single week. At 13, Tom Brady. Baltimore, I think they could make New England one-dimensional in this game. They've already been pretty good about stopping the pass this year. I think they could absolutely shut down the run. I made some comments in my start and sit video about this game. We've learned recently that James White is actually going to be limited. He's going to be questionable heading into the game. He's been a little bit limited with an injury. I was already worried about James White being taken out of the game script in this game for this reason alone. The Baltimore Ravens are giving up the 7th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, but they're also giving up the 4th fewest receptions, the 3rd fewest targets, and the 5th fewest receiving yards. So if they can completely take James White out, especially if he's limited in any way, shape, or form, he has a bad game. Now Brady's going to have to rely on a lot of other weapons outside of Julian Edelman. What are we going to get from the other guys in the lineup? I'm just worried. I'm worried about Tom Brady's upside this week. I think this could end up being a difficult game for New England on the road in Baltimore. We'll see what happens, but that's why I'm going to have him just outside the top 12 because I'm worried about his upside. Phillip Rivers is 14. He's been safe all year, but he's got virtually no ceiling. He's been throwing for a lot of yards, hasn't been scoring a lot of touchdowns. At 15, Carson Wentz, he gets the Chicago Bears, who are giving up the 6th fewest fantasy points per game. Also, Wentz in 4 of the last 5 weeks, less than 200 passing yards. Jacoby Brissett at number 16. There's no T.Y. Hilton this week, and Pittsburgh is only giving up 276 total yards at home this season. Could be a tough game for Brissett. Daniel Jones at 17. Dallas giving up the 4th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. They're also coming off the bye. They also get the extra day on Monday night. I have to expect that Dallas is going to come ready to play, and Daniel Jones could see some issues, some inconsistencies this week. Ryan Tannehill, really liked him last week, had him as a top 12 quarterback last week, nailed that pick. However, do not like him this week. Carolina's giving up only 14 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks right now. A tough matchup on the road. I want to like Ryan Tannehill more this week. Unfortunately, I just don't love the matchup. Mason Rudolph at 19. He lacks big upside. The passing volume just has not been there. Maybe without James Conner potentially this week. If that happens, then maybe we get a little bit more passing. We have to wait and see what happens. I've got him at 19, though. He's just lacked some upside so far, averaging about 14 fantasy points per game since he took over as the starter. And at number 20, Brandon Allen. I know that we said we're not going to trust him, but he does get the Cleveland Browns, giving up a fairly significant amount of points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Could end up happening. I don't know what for sure. I don't love it. So the one thing I will say about Brandon Allen is we're not trusting him this week. If you're in the middle of a playoff push, if you can't afford to lose, we are not trusting Brandon Allen getting his first start of his career at home this weekend. Just can't do it, unfortunately. But there you have it, top 20 quarterbacks for week 9 of the fantasy football season. A lot of information really quick. That's how we do it here. Don't forget, though, tonight, tune in here on YouTube at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be live, the Fantasy Headliners, answering all of your start and sit questions, hanging out, having a good time. Make sure that you tune in for that. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you're not a part of Headliner Nation already. Also, the notification bell, so when we do go live, you're going to get notification of that. And as always, if you have any questions, let us know below. Thanks so much, Headliner Nation. We'll see you on the live show. Good luck in week 9. Talk to you later.